books. Okay, let's talk about books. So I get constantly asked what kind of book I would recommend to an architect who's just starting with, for instance, computational design, or an architect who's just started studying architecture, or an architect who just finished his or her studies and is going into the, let's say, the workforce, right? So I came up with a list of 13 books that are quite uniform in terms of at which stage of your architectural development you're at, or architectural professional development you're at, and should fit to, well, everyone's needs, right? So these are like 13 books that I would recommend, and 13 books that I really enjoy myself. And I cut down the time that I will be using to present the books to 1 minute each, 1 minute per book, because we don't want this to become a 4-hour series. So 13 books in 13 minutes. Probably not going to be that. Probably gonna be closer to 20, but we'll see. So that's it for the intro. And I hope you'll enjoy the overview. Okay, so the first book that I'll start with is called Metapolis Dictionary of Advanced Architecture. This book is literally a dictionary about everything that's related to architecture. And what's more important is that, everything that I'm talking about is interconnected. And as you start reading a chapter on carbon fiber, you'll end up learning about, auditoriums, or maybe proportions of a fish, you never know. This makes it an amazing tool to be used for broadening your understanding about the field, and, well, always having something to add when talking with your fellow architects, which is nice. It's definitely a chonker, right? It's a thick boy. So once you've got it, it's going to stay in your house. You're not traveling with it. All in all, I really highly recommend it for everyone. Then we jump to one of my all-time favorites, a book with a very simple title, Siteless, 1001 Building Forms. I honestly bring this book with myself to the thesis meetings with my students, just for the sake of accelerating the never-ending creative process that is form finding. With this book, you'll get 1001 building forms, different building forms, each named in an extremely straightforward way, by the way. And that's all. I really appreciate that, honestly. There's almost no text, just pictures, right? Once you start going through these 1001 possible typologies, it becomes clear that you should redirect your efforts for searching for that completely unique form towards something that's more worthwhile, such as the spatial experience of the visitor, or some other crap like that. Yeah, I love it. Okay, so now from something very straightforward to something that's a bit on the heavy side. The Mereological City is written by Daniel Kohler, and honestly, I owe a lot to the guy. If it wasn't for his workshops during my student years, I probably would have never stepped into computational design. So that's that. Yeah, but enough about that. Let's talk about the book. So this book is a doctoral level work that studies the intersection between the field of Mereology, that's a tongue twister, and architecture, right? So basically breaking down a city, a full city, into both physical and non-physical parts. And those parts can further be broken down into smaller parts and so on, right? So in doing so, a network of part-to-whole relations is revealed that challenges the reader to look at architecture from kind of a different perspective, different lens, if you will. Perhaps this one is not for, perhaps it's not for everyone, but honestly, this one was definitely for me. And actually, while we're still at this kind of a theme, let's jump into philosophy, right? The Republic by Plato. Well, it's something that I think any architect should read, and I assume you either have read it already, or at least know of it, so I won't go too deep into this. This work teaches you how to kind of break down any concept into simplest and thus clearest parts, which is such a valuable skill to have as an architect. Yeah, just read it. Yeah, and now with philosophy out of the way, well, let's go for something that's very pragmatic, very straightforward. Biomorphic structures. If you're a student who's just getting started with computational design, chances are that you are really deep into this whole biomimicry shenanigans and other similar crap like that. I suggest going through this book just to see what kind of thoughts on the subject are out there, right? And what's already been done. So just so that you don't need to repeat it and think that you've came up with something completely new. That's always a problem. It's a super short read, which will cut your naive student points. It's gonna cut them in half, right? So it's definitely worth the while. Also, I think it's pretty cheap as well. With the next one, I don't even know where to start presenting. Colors of Light. Colors of Light is, well, the book that talks about light, I guess. And it does so in a very, very honest way. It doesn't do it via text, even though here you see text, it's just a preface. It does so via images, which I think for us as designers, it's such a much more clearer language to understand. I feel like we as architects tend to get so involved with building performance, with fancy forms, with newest manufacturing techniques, and so on, that we stop thinking about these simple moments of light and shadow and the play between them that we could bring to our architecture. And this book just kind of works as a constant reminder about don't forget, right? I really, really recommend this one. Speaking about just talking through images, the next one, Robot House book, is doing actually that, right? There's not a lot of text, and all it gives you are these, in my opinion, highly aesthetic, kind of inspirational pictures about robotic, not just manufacturing, but a whole building like in union with a robot through either manufacturing techniques or through the behavior of the building and so on. And just, yet again, showing you what's out there, but doing so in a very aesthetic way. So I honestly don't recommend this book for its content. I rather recommend it as a way of exploring different methods and techniques of how to present graphics. Just that. Actually, talking about images, I managed to massage this one in here because I really feel like it's important to talk about it. A manga, a Japanese manga by Tsutomu Nihei, Blam, right? It's a manga that talks about infinite city, right? A city through which the main protagonist moves through, and a city that just kept growing, right? So even if you're not, a fan of comic books and so on, the sheer volumes and spaces that this artist creates is astounding. It's amazing. And I got a lot of inspiration from this manga. This is only, I think I'm showing you volume 6. There's like 9 volumes in total, so 9 books in total. And I really suggest you read it and, make up your own mind if you like it or not. Next up, we have Superlight. Superlight is, it's a book that talks about, it's a very pragmatic book, first of all, right? It shows you the drawings, it shows you the construction, it shows you where the buildings are, and it shows you the buildings themselves. And why is it called super light? Well, it's because it talks about lightweight buildings, right? So usually when we are working on different architecture, we do pretty heavy stuff, right? Concrete and stuff like that. But from time to time, you get a client who wants to have something floating, something light. And this book will introduce you to that world of architecture where everything is made out of super lightweight materials. Again, super pragmatic book, but I feel like it's a very, very useful one to have. Speaking, by the way, of useful books, we have Material Innovation in Architecture. Yet again, a book that I always bring to my thesis students as well as my bachelor students in my studio to kind of force them to think about architecture through the lens of materials and what kind of material, decide what kind of material they're going to use. So this book goes through all of the different newest materials that are used in architecture and their kind of examples of their application. So just taking, this kind of a set of materials and applying it to reality and showcasing that in a format of a book, I think is a very valuable thing. And this is a very valuable work to have. I highly recommend this one to anyone who's dealing with actual construction of the buildings. This one, where do I even begin? Built by the Sea. So I'm a computational designer. Well, at least I would like to think that I am. And most of my time spent designing is done so in Grasshopper and so on. So having this book here that actually just shows you these small buildings in fjords of Norway, and really well-designed small buildings, I might add, that talk about, the intimacy of spaces and the interconnectedness between nature and the interior, brings me back, like this kind of a work brings me back to reality, to actually think in small scale, to really solve the detail in architecture and not just think about buildings through math, because I feel like it's definitely a plague that goes through the newest movements in architecture. I strongly suggest reading this one. So there are two more books that I don't have them at home, but I still suggest them. One of them is In Praise of Shadows. So it's a very light read, as you can see. It's a very thin book, and it's just text, no images, and it talks about the aesthetics of Japanese culture, right? So it talks about the understanding of aesthetics and the interplay between form and light and shadow, and it does so in a very philosophical sense, but at the same time it's very, very pragmatic. So it's very hard to, well, it's very Japanese. Let's say it like that. It's very Japanese. I think that while other books might not be for everyone, right, and you just choose whether or not you want to read it, this one should be read by everyone, not just designers, not just architects, everyone, because it will broaden your view quite a bit. And the last one, Citizens of No Place. This book got me into architecture. Like before I started architecture, or before I started studying architecture, I wanted to be an animator or something like that, right? And after reading this book and seeing how an architect can think about multiple aspects of both space, human behavior, the development of the development of a building or of a city, it became very apparent to me that this is what I want to do. This is what I want to do for a living. And as you can see, the book is actually a comic book, which is a very interesting format to have when explaining architecture. And I really wish we had more books like this because it's so digestible. It's such a great read, and it it goes down really, really easily. So this one, if you're just starting up with architecture, I suggest you read it and see for yourself if it fits you. And there it is. 13 books that I recommend. Well, honestly, I spent a lot of time just recording and re-recording and so on this video and shuffling the books around, changing up the list and adding, removing parts from this list of 13 books. At one point it was like 25 that I wanted to recommend. So, but these 13 books are the ones that I feel like are kind of important for everyone to read, or at any stage of your education or of your professional development. Because these books, they don't talk about architecture. Well, some of them do, but most of them don't talk about architecture in a very straightforward way. They don't teach you about what's good architecture. Rather, they focus on broadening your field of vision. Let's say broadening your field of vision as to what can be added to your knowledge base to become a better architect, right? So I will not probably change the list anymore. I'm still editing the video. I will probably not change the list anymore, and I'm pretty happy with the list. So all of these books will be available in the video description below. Links to them. I will try to find the best prices for them for you to purchase if you want them. If you'll see an Amazon link in there, that's my Amazon affiliate link. That means, you buy stuff from Amazon, I get like a cent or 2 cents from the purchase. If 1 million people buy the book, and anyway, I should stop selling out. But yeah, I really wanted this to be a helpful video, and a video that I can turn people who ask me for book recommendations towards, just to give, to have something to give. So, hope this is gonna be a success. Okay, I'll see you in the next one.